Hello, everybody. Welcome to this is the second of 12 Facebook Lives, all about the Thrive model. So last week we did T for trauma, and we're talking about trauma. What is it? How do we release it? How do we get past it? And last week, Daniela introduced me and interviewed me on the subject of trauma. And today the roles are reversed. So I'm going to be asking her about trauma. Now we know that we're short. We know that a lot of people have talked short on time, and this is an incredibly dense topic that we can really get our teeth into. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and encapsulate it for you. And Daniela and I love working together because we have that love of a metaphor and a love of simplicity and a love of getting right to the heart of the issue, because that's where the answers are. You know, the answers are in our heart. A lot of traumas up here in the head, manifesting coming out of our heart, but the heart is essentially a lot simpler than the head. And I think because, I don't know about you, Daniel, because we're coming from the heart, it seems a little bit simpler to us than it may be to some of our more psychological colleagues, should we say? Would
Absolutely.
You see that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The heart does simplify what the mind gets very tangled up in. And there's nothing wrong in it. It's just, you know, we could be jumping around from thing to thing, thought to thought. And coming from the heart, it's just much simpler. And from there, we go into the body and feeling the feelings.
Yeah.
Allowing them to release, right?
Yeah. And something that pops into my head now is that psychology used to be about the soul as well as the head. And now it isn't anymore. It's about the head. And I don't find actually many answers in my head. Do you? Do you find answers? Do you have fancy? Are they?
I can get quite lost. And now, after years of working with myself and learning how to work with myself, I know that I have to go into the body and breathe through it.
Yeah.
And there are therapists, and I would like to say that there are therapists that get it, people that do counsel, that really understand that deep within there's like a soul, you know, at the bottom of everything there is that brilliance.
Yeah. I was lost discussing this with somebody this morning, and I came up with the perfect metaphor afterwards, and I just said, oh, why didn't I say that? So
what is it?
It's this metaphor. So Daniela's been having a look at some of my work with kids, and so we're talking about trauma as a feeling, and the feelings that come from, you know. So why do we feel the way that we do? Well, people will go into all sorts of thoughts about that, but why we feel the way we do is because of the thoughts in our head. So our feelings come from our thoughts, like juice comes from fruit, and it is as simple as that. So when I explain that to people, they say, "Oh, so you're into CBT, Simon? You know, feelings come from thoughts." Yes, I know that. Yes. And I say, well, no, not quite actually, because what I'm saying is that we aren't our feelings, and we aren't our thoughts. We're the juicer that's creating those feelings. We're creating the juice, the feelings, from the thought, which is the fruit. And our juicer, when we arrive on this planet, our juicer is empty. There's no fruit in it. There's no thoughts. There's no ability. There's no thoughts about ourselves, for example. There's no thoughts about what we need to do to prove ourselves to the world, to prove that we're good enough. We simply don't have any of those thoughts in our juicer. We don't have that. We have no traumatic traumatic tangerines in our juicer that can create the trauma of feelings. So let's look at the unconditioned soul, the empty juicer. And let's focus on who we are, identity, not the feelings we feel or the thoughts that we think.
I agree. And I do have to say something from a spiritual point of view, that the soul or the spirit does carry influence. If we want to go there just for a second, we do carry influences from past lifetimes, right? From other beings that we were in other moments in time, okay? But when we come in, there's no registry of thoughts and beliefs and all of that. I mean, it's there in a different dimension of the soul, but as far as the intellect and the feelings go, you can say we are kind of starting with a clean slate, you know, because the child, the newborn, just knows it's its own expansion. It still is in the God essence and the God presence until we go and muck things up for that little beautiful, innocent, pure newborn, right?
Yeah.
And that's our history. That's where we're starting from, you and I right now. We're starting from there.
Yeah. So would you like to share some of your story and your views on trauma? Because I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but I'm looking at the clock now, and I've been talking for 7 minutes, and this is supposed to be.
No. We needed to lead into this. It's all perfect. Absolutely. Yeah. So just to kind of just to where we left off last week with your finding out about your adoption, right? I found out when my adoptive mother was driving me home from an athletic practice as a young teenager. I must have been 13, 14 years old. And she just blurted out of her mouth the last 15 minutes of the journey home that she wasn't my mother and that I was adopted. And I just remember feeling paralyzed by, you know, as a young girl, I was very much in my body. I was very much connected to her and how she was spitting this out at me in a very quick, nonchalant way. And I was paralyzed in the back seat, you know, like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And with the harshness and the brutality and how she would say things. I mean, there she was covering herself, you know, and it was more like a cover up of I'm uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to share this. But there was also her own disconnection from my heart with hers. Like she just blurted this thing out. And I had known from my best girlfriend at the time when I was 10 years old. I mean, I remember being on the front stoop coming out of my pool with her. And she's like, you know, you're not from here. You're from Italy, actually, because we were in America at the time. And I was shocked. I was like, whoa, someone had hit me with, you know, like, I don't know, like a stone in my head. And I was like reeling from the shock. And so I just kept it in because I knew that I wasn't supposed to know about it, right? And then years later, this thing comes out. And then because my mind was more sophisticated than a 10-year-old, right? I was now 14, 15 or so. And I was starting to put two and two together of why they treated me this way, why they were brutalizing my body, why they were mean and cruel, you know? And it was like, because I'm not theirs, because They hate me. They don't like me. No, oh, I get it now. And that's the sense that I made out of them doing what they did to me, and the things that the cruel-hearted things that they used to say to me. You know, I started creating beliefs from that moment on, which I was already doing beforehand, but now it was like I really sensed her disconnection from me. And there I was, like, reeling, you know, in the back seat of, oh, okay, I get it now.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that sounds so horrible. When you said you were paralyzed, you know, I thought about the fight or flight and flee, fight, you know, paralyzed. Yeah, I mean, and the difference between how I was told and you was told, it was like, that's terrible. That's terrible, because I grew up knowing, and you had this shock, and all the, nobody likes shock.
No. And that was part of the accumulated trauma that I went through and that I was just holding on to for all those years, you know, until.
So you were holding on to it.
And
so
making stuff up about it. I didn't have the ability. Here's the other thing that's important to realize, is that I was getting blamed. I was not only the adopted child, along with my adopted brother. We weren't siblings, biological siblings. He was also adopted, and he was 5 years older than me. And there was a scapegoat scenario. So I was the scapegoat, and I was the one that was named the troublemaker, the one that was making everyone's lives miserable. So I was holding on to a lot of stuff, and I was making myself, I was also blaming myself, because when your parents, these godlike figures, these authority figures, are telling you it's your fault that everything's a mess in this family, it's just, and I know many people out there listening to this didn't have the perfect adoption, and are tuning into what I'm saying, because there is that, right? You're the outsider. You're the one that's making everyone's lives miserable. So that's where I was coming from. And my goodness, did I have loads of stuff to unwind, because then the self-loathing at a certain age started, because I just couldn't explain to myself, I couldn't justify the hatred that these people had for me.
No. So how did you start to unpick this or move past this?
Well, I ran away when I was 19, and I found myself in a very big city, limping. Literally, my body was already at 19 years old. I just wasn't in a good place. And I started working, and, you know, I had my own flat, and I started working and making some money. And I started working. Then I was working as a model, and I was very lucky to be sent back to my home country. And I went to Milan, and that was the perfect escape, because then I could start the search for my biological family. But, you know, as things have, as life works out, you know, I thought that was going to be the end. Finding them was going to put everything in place for me. And what it did was it just opened up, like, this whole thing of panic attacks and anxiety, because I was already suffering from panic attacks and anxiety. And, you know, when I did years later find, it took me about 3 years to find my biological family. it was like either I get help or I'm gonna do some real damage to myself, because back then I was already feeling very suicidal because the panic attacks were just like really bad, and I found myself in a hole, a dark hole, and I had to reach out and get help.
Yeah. So where did you see the hope in this?
Well, I also have a very strong spirit, and I had to go to source. Like, I didn't just go and have therapy. I was like, I needed to know, like, why did this happen? Why was I so destined, to end up like this? Because now I'm in Italy, I'm back in my home country, and some years have passed, and I found my family, and I had to move away from them also because that was very dysfunctional. So I had to really, the whole thing about me was finding source within me, finding a way back to my own sense of presence. I knew therapy wasn't going to be enough. I had that extra edge to me that was like, no. I need to find source. I need to awaken. And then this whole process, this whole journey of therapy, but also like looking for mystical teachings, looking to awaken to my own soul's journey, because I had to find out why this was happening. So the why was like a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you found source, what did you see? How did you feel? What did you think? How did it?
It wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. It was a journey, and it was an uncovering journey. And it took me quite a long time to realize that I was source, that I was an element of source, and that I was the juicer, in effect.
Yeah. The other thing that's popping into my head, the other metaphor that's popping into my head, because that juicer is so simple, it's like it's easily dismissed.
Yeah.
So I want to try a more adult metaphor, and the one that I was thinking of Italy. I was talking about this to somebody this morning, and it was Michelangelo being interviewed about the statue of David, and how did he do it? And he said, well, David was there in the
block of stone,
in the block all the time. All I had to do was to reveal him. And I've always loved that. I always love that metaphor. And for me, that is the unveiling. For me, that is the unveiling, the removing of the stone.
Right, the chipping away,
right, of what's on us. Yeah. The removal of the traumatic tangerines from the juicer. Yeah, the seeing that we are that perfection, we are that we're the juicer fresh out of the box from Amazon. We open the cardboard box, and then inside it there's a glossy, shiny, coloured box with the printer of a photo of this juicer on. Then we open that box and we find a plastic wrapper to protect the juicer. And then we tear that wrapper off, and that's who we are. That's that juicer, and it's stainless steel, and it's shiny, and there's no trauma there at all. The trauma has come into the traumatic tangerines have come into the top of the juicer, i.e. the traumatic thoughts have entered into our heads. Those thoughts have created the feelings that come out of our hearts, and the anger and the hopelessness and the distress and all that stuff that comes out of our heart, those horrible feelings. But if we identify with the feelings, like most of us do, you know, I am traumatized. I am traumatized.
I am my panic attacks.
I am my panic attacks. I am. Or we'll sort of try and change those with affirmations. Oh,
exactly.
I am peace. Yeah. Rather than seeing the unconditioned soul. Sorry, the being. Yeah. Seeing the being hidden by the stone, revealed by Michelangelo, revealed by the juicer, by not focusing on the fruit, that's the old moldy fruit that's at the top, or the juice that's coming out of it.
Yes, and
sounds really easy, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's a wonderful metaphor, because that chipping away process isn't chipping away at the trauma. It's chipping away at all the overlays that now are personality through all those years, because you've got traumatic issues, right? And then you have to go out in life, and then what you do is, like, you have to wind yourself around all these plates. You have to create all these shells. You have to create all these layers so that nobody can see the vulnerability, because the vulnerability you're thinking is crap. The vulnerability is actually the beauty. But as a young woman or a young person in life, it's like you just learn that you have to cover that stuff up. So the chipping away is like the unmasking of all those layers until you get to the trauma. And then you can breathe through it, because the hard part isn't the trauma. The hard part is the chipping away, so that you can actually get to the lies that are underneath. It's the stratum just around the stone. It's the stratum just around the Michelangelo, if you want, right? It's that stratum, that thing that's like in Italian it's the pellicola. It's like the it's just that gauzy part that's there just before the magnificence of. And we traumatize ourselves with our own self-judgment and our own blame. And that's what I had to unwind. That's what my chipping away was about. The self-loathing, the blaming, the self-judgment, the self-criticism that was actually holding the trauma, the original trauma, in place.
Yeah, because the trauma was, the events were long gone, but the memories still lingered on. And I was talking to, was I talking to you about it? I was talking about the fact that this is like a wall with graffiti. You know, there's a wall. It's a brick wall.
Yeah, last week we were talking about this, right?
Yeah, and how, so your mum and dad, you believed them. You believed the graffiti that they wrote on your wall, and then you started unwittingly joining in and graffitiing too, and that's the kind of the self, that's the negative self-talk. That's the bully on the outside has become the bully on the inside. And I know a song about that, because I've done that too. We all do that. We kind of like, we take somebody's, we listen to an authoritative voice and we believe it, and we start perpetuating that.
Right, because we believe they must be right.
They must be right.
I couldn't be innocent. I couldn't be pure. And then we find out, when we come to our place where we are now, that actually we were pure and innocent.
Yeah. And if you're wondering, people, well, how do I do this? Because it does sound easy. Well, I mean, I've been looking at this stuff 11 years. 12 years. You've been looking at this stuff 40?
20 years, good 20
20
years.
Good 20 years. Yeah. So how do we see it? Well, we see it. We see it when we see it. And we see it by hearing other people, we see it by following the finger that somebody else is pointing at. Not looking at my finger, but looking at where I'm pointing. So I'm pointing to the soul, the unconditioned soul, the human spirit, the empty juicer, the David underneath the rock. That's what Daniela and I are doing. We're pointing you, dear viewers, to that. But you'll have to see it for yourself, unfortunately, because we can't get inside your heads and turn your eyes towards it.
Right. It's an organic process, just like you don't plant a seed in the dirt and then every day go out with the shovel and dig it up and say, is it sprouting yet? No, you have to leave it, and it has to go through its organic process, and every process is different. It is for you to discover your way out of it. We can help you with that because we've been there, but you need to find where that is for you, because my journey isn't like yours, Simon, and your journey won't be like anyone else's. I mean, there are similarities, of course, but it's personal and it's a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
And it's the only one really living, that's true. It's worth living, because once you get out on the other side, right, there's another world waiting for you.
Yeah. That's a perfect place to stop. So next week we'll be talking about healing. We've got a quite a contrarian view on trauma. We've got a pretty contrarian view on healing, haven't we?
We do.
We do.
Indeed.
So
thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks, viewers. Yeah. See you next week.
See you next week.